Hey friendly folk, welcome back to Nahoos. Hope you're ready to jump on into the hot news. We're gonna get it all going right now, talking about, well, there's a lot of viruses going around, in case you're not aware, and we might get demonetized for even saying it, but that beer virus, or the anti-Budweiser virus, can we call it that? I don't know. I don't want to get demonetized by YouTube because they seem to be throwing out cash bans on anybody who's talking about it, but it does appear like there's a lot of indication that the tech industry is going to be hit even harder because of this virus than was initially thought. Originally, we reported on a previous episode of Hot News that companies were being shut down until the beginning of February. They're just going to take a few extra days off, especially with the city of Wuhan being shut down. But now it looks like it's going to be even worse than that. TrendForce just came out with a report estimating that there are going to be some big double-digit percentage loss in many of the major categories that we would expect to be part of tech. So smartwatches is expected to be down 16% in the first quarter of 2020.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. That is a lot. 14 million smartwatches down to 12. And then some of the biggest losses are looking to be video game consoles, a 10% loss, down from 6.9 million to 6.2 million. And then notebooks going from 35 million to 30.7 million, losing 12.3%. That's the estimated impact that we're expecting right now in many major categories because of the virus. Obviously, this is talking about volume of sales, and this isn't necessarily directly related to price, but as we know, as supply goes down and demand stays the same, the price has to slide higher. So it does seem like you should be expecting either shortages of your favorite products at the same price or increased prices on things that you would expect. And that's one of the things that Apple has come out and said with their earnings report that they came out and said that in the first quarter, their iPhone sales are going to recover more slowly than they were originally expecting because of the virus and the fact that a lot of their producers are actually regaining speed much more slowly than they were anticipating. They thought that they would be able to produce a lot more, a lot faster, but they're not shut down, so they were just like, it's not going to be produced. So if iPhones actually end up going out of stock or there's limited supply, this is why Apple is saying, get ready, it's potentially not going to be there. But what is potentially going to be there, according to Bloomberg, what we should expect is that the new iPhone SE 2 and the smaller iPad Pro with triple camera on the back, just like the new iPhone 11 Pros, those should still be announced in March. However, the issue with that is that while they're saying that it's going to be announced, it likely probably won't be launched, especially if they're still having stock issues on their high-end iPhone lineup. I wouldn't necessarily expect for the launch to coincide with a lot of stock being out there, so you might maybe expect a paper launch from Apple if they are indeed launching the iPhone SE 2 and iPad Pro. Apple hasn't directly confirmed any of this, but there is a lot of industry speculation saying these are indeed coming, and supply chains indicating that there are parts coming out and being produced for the lower end iPhones. But let's transition over to another mobile manufacturer, which is Huawei, which with the US trade war that's going on with Huawei and the spying concerns and the fact that they're somehow tied to the Chinese government, all of that, the US apparently in the latest report coming out of Reuters is trying to ban TSMC from selling products to Huawei completely. Which is weird because TSMC is based in Taiwan, it's not an American company, so how could the US ban a Taiwanese company from selling to China? Well, apparently the US is trying to alter the Foreign District Product Rule, which subjects some foreign-made goods based on US technology or software to US regulations, and current US regulations means that Huawei isn't going to be used in any official capacity, so they would be exercising a local domestic rule on foreign things that use some sort of US product in how they produce things. So if a TSMC fabrication facility uses any US-based item in their fabrication, even though it's not on US soil, they still have to get approval from America before they can sell to their partners. Obviously, a lot of people would be heavily concerned with this. This is a huge expansion of power that hasn't been necessarily seen before and would basically mean that major companies such as this now have to subject themselves to the rule of the US government, even though they're not based in the US, which, depending on your position, is a good or bad thing or a thing.
Seems like a huge overstep.
Well, I'm not going to voice my opinion. One of the sources that Reuters is reporting said what they're trying to do is make sure that no chips go to Huawei that they can possibly control. When Huawei was approached about this, they didn't make a comment. The US Commerce Department also declined to comment, and then TSMC said that they don't talk about hypothetical questions that aren't reality. Obviously, this does seem to be in line with the current US stance on how things are approached with regards to Huawei and the Chinese government, but we'll also have to wait wait and see if this is an actual policy that may or may not get implemented, but could have long-reaching ramifications outside of just a Huawei trade disagreement. Not trade disagreement, spy disagreement. It's about spying. It's about selling our data.
Yeah.
And then in a completely unrelated note, except for it's somehow related to TSMC because it's about AMD. Anyways, the ASRock B550AM has been pictured. This is one of the most highly anticipated chipsets coming out, the lower end chipset for the new Ryzen 3000 motherboards. It's kind of sad because it does have PCI Express 4.0, which is a good thing for a B550, but it's only on the PCI Express slot. You don't actually get it on the M.2 slot that's on the motherboard, which is kind of weird because one of the main implementations of PCI Express 4.0 is the new NVMe drives that get between 5 and 7 gigabytes per second read and write speeds. So to not have that on a PCI Express 4.0 board kind of defeats the purpose. Like, yeah, you might need it for certain cards with the new AMD setup, but at the same time, do you really? I don't know. What do you think of PCI Express 4.0 only being on a single slot on the B550AM? And then I've got a piece of news that Reece is going to be super excited for. You ready for it, Reece?
Yeah!
Blizzard has confirmed that there is a Diablo and Overwatch series coming to Netflix.
I'm in.
The president of Activision Blizzard on LinkedIn confirmed that there's a Netflix series for Diablo in development alongside an Overwatch animated series. The Diablo series is currently in pre-production and is supposed to be vaguely reminiscent of the anime style of Castlevania, which sounds exciting. It does fit in that like general feeling.
Yeah, I can see it.
And then I'm sure a lot of people want the Overwatch world lore expanded into its own animated series. Everybody's really loved the shorts that have come out from Overwatch, so putting that in a series is really cool for a lot of people. Also, don't release Warcraft 3 Reforged in a piece of crap state. Also, don't pull your games off of GeForce Now. Blizzard, you might get this one thing about doing something right, but you're just trying to get money, and you're doing it half in the wrong way. I'm watching you. Keep it. I celebrate the things you do right. I'm going to complain about the things you're doing wrong. Stop. I'm watching you. And I also watched the Witcher series on Netflix. And now you might be able to watch the Witcher video game on your eyeballs right here in VR because there's a new Nexus mod that came out showing that somebody ported over one of the levels from the original Witcher game into Unreal Engine so that it can now run in VR. We're actually planning on doing a dedicated video of this over on UFD Tech channel, so you can stay tuned for that. But the Witcher in VR, who doesn't want to sit in VR for 40 to 80 hours in a single player RPG? Not me. I do want.
I believe you.
I believe myself. But then there's also some exciting news regarding the Switcher, that is The Witcher 3 on the Nintendo Switch. It's getting a really, really cool patch coming out in 3.6, which is going to enable some new graphical options such as bloom, sharpen, depth of field, chromatic aberration, water quality, foliage visibility range, and anti-aliasing. Okay. That's pretty cool. So this is already in a patch that's come out in Korea. And then it's also going to have cross-save on the Switch from your Steam or GOG game, which is incredible, which means I could play my GOG game that I beat New Game Plus. I could do this. I could get the Switcher. They might get my money more. Tell you that. Speaking of the Switch, a Cryengine game has finally made its way onto the Switch, or it's going to launch onto the Switch. The Cryengine, in case you're not familiar, is the engine behind Crysis. So if you want Crysis on the Switch, this is the baby step in order to get there, because the Cryengine game Warface is coming out to the Switch sometime soon, which would potentially mean that we might get more ports and might entice other developers. If they see Cryengines running on the Switch, they might be like, hey, I should launch that on the Switch. I'm looking at you, Atlas. Get Persona 5 on the Switch now. Now, Persona 5 Royal.
You tell him, Brett.
I'm telling him.
You tell him.
Atlas, do it, please. It's a perfect game for a mobile format, and since Sony is abandoning the mobile handheld, Switch is our only option. You're releasing Persona 5 Scramble on it. Just get me the dang main game. Speaking of dang main things, Samsung is removing a lot of their main features from 4K TVs in the year of 2020 because they're going to try to push a lot of people to move on to 8K. Obviously, nobody needs 8K. There's hardly any 8K content out there, but Samsung has decided, well, in case you want HDMI 2.1, that's on our 8K TV. You want more than 100 dimming zones on your LED TV? Well, you're going to have to get 8K TVs because in 2019, their best 4K had over 500 dimming zones. Over 500. Now they're reducing it to 100 in 2020 because they're trying to move all of those features to 8K. Little shady. Don't really like it. Nobody's really ready for 8K. I'm not a fan of this. But they're basically removing all of their high-end QLED panels from 4K and just shifting them over to 8K. So if you want the high-end panels, you have to go 8K, which obviously is going to be a price premium, which means Samsung's going to have higher revenue, which means LG's the 4K TV of choice now, because WebOS is better. Facts. WebOS has always been better. Since the Palm Pixie days, Palm Pre days, WebOS was amazing. It's not the same operating system, but it's close. Same idea, same words. Do you want to go to space? Do you want to go to space, Reece? Well, SpaceX has just signed an agreement with Space Adventures to send people to space, hopefully by the end of 2021 or early in 2022. 4 individuals will be able to fly to space, and they'll fly farther from Earth than anyone has in the last 50 years. They're going to launch from Cape Canaveral, Florida, which means we can drive over and see it, Reece.
Heck yeah.
We could drive over and see the first commercial launch of space stuff. Speaking of being out in space, that's where Google's head is when it comes to Stadia. They haven't released a major update in 69 days. Nice.
Nice.
But they finally announced something new after people complained on Reddit, and they will finally be bringing Stadia out to more phones. This is what we wanted, more phones supported for Stadia.
I can't even use it right now because I can't switch my account over to a US one yet.
Yeah, they hate you. Google hates you. Their head's in the space.
Can't I just set it up from a browser?
No, they don't like you, Reece. Okay, well now Stadia is going to be supported on every Samsung S series device from S8 all the way up to the new S20 Ultras, and then also on the Razer phone and the Asus ROG phone. The 2 gaming phones are going to get Stadia. They still aren't bringing Wi-Fi out to the controller, which was a promised feature at launch, and they're still not fixing any of the resolution or performance issues. So what are you doing? Stadia at GeForce Now has launched, $5 a month. They're better than you are. They have a free service that gets them 1080p 60 FPS gameplay. What are you doing?
Garbage.
Garbage. It's terrible. Disgusting.
Disgusting!
But while their heads may be in space, their cloud seems to be doing just fine because they're going to be rolling out new Epyc servers based on the 2nd generation Epyc processors. While not based on Zen 2, are going to be rolled into N2D VMs by Google, so they're going to be pretty epic, you might say. And before I hurt anybody else with more of my puns, I'm going to end this episode of Not Who's There. Thank you so much for watching. Everybody who commented on our sign yesterday saying, why don't you rotate it 180 degrees? It's because the power cord's at the bottom, and if you put it at the top, it doesn't really, it doesn't fall nicely, and then it'd be weird, and it'd be a mess, and then we can't flip it over because then it'd be shining on the wall, and then you can't screw it in because the transparent panel that's holding the neon isn't, it's just, this is as good as it's going to get until they fix it. But they owe us a free one because they screwed it up. They've already acknowledged that, and we're going to get that sorted, and then we'll be hot news, not who's. Okay, I'm done ranting. Love you too. Bye. So itchy. Itchy nosy. Well, I'm not gonna voice my opinion.
I am!
Well, that's what you get from a South African always opposing America. Why don't you go home?
Shut up.
Fair enough.